Get out, or I'll have bulldozers flatten this place in 48 hours. Karen Fitzgerald, our HOA president, practically shrieked at my door at 7 a.m., thrusting a stack of evacuation papers in my face like a battle flag. Hurricane Helga loomed on the horizon, but her venomous threat felt more menacing than any storm brewing out there. My family had cherished this lakefront cabin since 1962, and we weren't even part of her precious HOA. 37 safety violations, she hissed, her words dripping with spite, all mysteriously slapped together just last week. I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching her eye twitch with barely contained fury, convinced she'd already claimed victory. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Because what Karen didn't know about my property was about to unravel. Her $50 million scheme. Behind her stood her son Tyler, a 28-year-old still tethered to Mommy's basement, holding up his phone to record what he smugly thought would be his viral breakthrough. "Yeah, we're at the illegal cabin," he droned to his dozen followers, mimicking some amateur sleuth. "My mum's about to serve justice HOA style." I took another calm sip, masking the storm brewing inside as I plotted my next move. "Karen, this cabin's been in my family since the 60s, I said evenly. "We're not even in your HOA. Her eye twitched again. I'd struck a chord. "That doesn't matter," she snapped. "Your property's within the greater Lakeside Estates area, so it falls under our emergency jurisdiction during natural disasters." She shoved the paper at me again, and this time I grabbed it, flipping through what looked like a 50-page fever dream of suburban control. "Let me get this straight," I said, skimming the absurd list of violations. "You're saying my cabin breaks 37 HOA rules that popped up last week?" Her smile stretched wider than I thought humanly possible, fueling the tension. "Don't miss what happens next. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any confrontation with the HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. Safety regulations, Mr. Morrison. Your paint is beige instead of approved warm beige. Your grass is 2.75 in tall instead of the maximum 2.5. You don't have the required house numbers in Helvetica font. And most importantly, she leaned in like she was delivering the killing blow. Private beach access is now prohibited for non-conforming structures. Tyler zoomed in on my face, probably hoping to catch my defeat, but I just raised an eyebrow. Non-conforming to what exactly? "To our new Lakeside Premium Community Standards," Karen declared. And I noticed Tyler quickly turning his camera away as his mother's mask slipped for just a second. "We need this location it's for community safety during the storm." But Tyler, bless his inability to keep his mouth shut, chimed in, "Mom, this spot is perfect for that beach bar you were talking about. The view is incredible." Karen's face went from fake tan to genuine pale in about 2 seconds. She grabbed Tyler's arm hard enough to make him yelp. "We're leaving 48 hours, Morrison. After that, we'll have no choice but to take drastic measures." She spun on her designer heels, which immediately sank into my gravel driveway, forcing her to do an awkward wobble march back to her car. I watched them drive away in Karen's white Range Rover with the HOA president vanity plate, and was about to head back inside when I noticed my elderly neighbor Dorothy Walsh standing by her garden, pretending to water plants that were already soaking from last night's rain. "Quite a show," she said, not looking at me directly. "That woman's been planting something for months now. Been watching her drive by your place, taking pictures, making calls." Dorothy was 68, a retired teacher who'd lived here almost as long as my family had. Her father and my grandfather had been best friends back in the day. "She mentioned why she needs my cabin so badly," I asked, walking over to her fence. Dorothy finally looked at me, and there was something in her eyes. knowledge, maybe even worry. Ryan, your grandfather was a smart man, very smart. He used to tell my father, the real value isn't in what you can see, it's in what's underneath. She paused, glancing toward where Karen's car had disappeared. You ever go through all those papers he left you? I mean, really go through them? I shrugged. Some of them? Most of it's in that old tin box in the closet. Why? Dorothy smiled, but it didn't reach her eye. Just thinking you might want to take a closer look, especially with a storm coming. Storms have a way of uncovering things. She turned back to her oversaturated plants, clearly done with the conversation. I stood there for a moment, processing her words, then headed back to my cabin. But I'd barely made it to the door when I heard it, the rumble of heavy machinery looking toward the main road. I could see it, a bright yellow bulldozer being transported on a flatbed truck, moving slowly past my driveway. Tyler was following in his beat-up Honda Civic, still recording. And as they passed, he lowered his window and shouted, 48 hours, Morrison. Better start packing. Tuesday morning, this place becomes history. Sleep tight. The machinery rumble faded, but the threat hung in the air like the approaching storm. I looked at my cabin, my grandfather's cabin, with its weathered wood siding and sturdy stone foundation. Whatever Karen was planning, she'd picked the wrong family to mess with. I headed inside straight for the closet. Time to see what Grandpa Morrison had hidden in that tin box. The 50-page violation notice was a masterpiece of bureaucratic insanity. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold, reading through rules that seemed designed by someone with a personal vendetta against common sense. Violation number 12. Unauthorized bird feeders creating unsanctioned wildlife gathering. Violation number 23. Deck chairs facing the wrong cardinal direction. But it was violation number 37 that made me pause. Private beach access prohibited for structures not conforming to the Lakeside Premium Beach Initiative. There it was again, beach. What the hell was Karen planning with my beach? A knock at the door interrupted my reading. Dorothy stood there, with a photo album tucked under her arm and a look that said she'd made a decision about something. Mind if I come in? She asked, though she was already stepping past me. I've been thinking about what your grandfather used to say about how some people can get rich, but nobody can rebuild trust once it's broken. She settled onto my couch like she belonged there, which in a way she did. Our families went way back. Dorothy, what's this about? I asked, joining her in the living room. She opened the album, revealing black and white photos from the 60s and 70s. This is Morrison Beach, she said, pointing to a picture of families picnicking by the water. Your grandfather, my father, and about 6 other families all pitched in to buy this stretch of shoreline back in 1960. But your grandfather, he did something clever. She flipped to another page, showing legal documents. While the others bought lots for their cabins, your grandfather bought something else. My father never told me exactly what, but he used to say George Morrison played the long game. He saw what others couldn't. Dorothy looked at me. That tin box you mentioned? I think it's time you looked inside, really looked. Your grandfather told my father to make sure the next generation understood what they had. I'm keeping that promise now. She stood up, leaving the album on my coffee table. Karen's already started something. She can't stop. I saw the contracts. Beach Club, they're calling it $50 million project, but she needs... Dorothy paused at my door. She needs what you have, Ryan, whether you know it or not. After Dorothy left, I went straight to the bedroom closet. The tin box sat on the top shelf, covered in dust, exactly where I had left it after Grandpa died 2 years ago. I'd gone through it briefly, then seeing old photos and papers, but grief had made me hasty. Now I opened it with purpose. Inside were bundled documents tied with string yellowed with age. The first bundle was photos. Grandpa with his fishing buddies, cabin construction pictures, family gathering. But underneath was a leather folder, and inside that my hands started shaking as I read the ornate script on the aged paper. Deed of land ownership, 500 FT of Shoreline property, Lake Minnetonka, dated September 15, 1962. I had to read it 3 times before it sank in. This wasn't just about the cabin. Grandpa had bought 500 FT of Shoreline, the entire beach frontage, along what was now lakeside estates. But before I could process this fully, the sound of heavy machinery returned, much louder this time. I ran outside to see not 1 but 3 pieces of construction equipment setting up just beyond my property line, or what I thought was my property line. Karen was there directing workers in hard hats, pointing at stakes. They were driving into the ground. A sign was already going up. Future site of Lakeside Premium Beach Club, opening soon. Tyler was there too, filming everything, practically dancing with excitement. "Hey, Morrison," Tyler called out when he saw me. "Getting the party started early. Mum says by tomorrow night this whole area will be fenced off. You better get your last looks at the lake from your deck." "Oh wait, you'll be gone by then." He laughed at his own joke, while Karen studiously ignored me. But I could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew I was watching. I walked closer, staying just on my side of what they'd marked as the property line. "Interesting spot for
"A beach club," I called out, "especially since this is private property." Karen finally turned, her smile sharp as broken glass.
"The HOA has verified all property lines, Mr. Morrison. This beach has always been part of the common area. We're simply developing it for the benefit of all residents." "All residents who can afford the membership fees, you mean?" I watched her.
I twitch again. I was getting good at finding her tails. "This conversation is over," she snapped. "You have 36 hours left. I suggest you use them wisely."
As I turned to go, one of the workers was unrolling a site plan. I caught a glimpse of it. The beach club design extended well into what I now knew was my 500 FT of shore. They were building on my land. Back in the cabin, I called 3 lawyers. The first 2 were suddenly unavailable when I mentioned going up against the HOA. The third actually laughed. "Karen Fitzgerald. Good luck, buddy. She's got connections all over town." I hung up, frustrated, and that's when my phone rang.
"Unknown number. Morrison." The voice was cold, professional. "I understand you're being difficult about the evacuation order." "Who is this?" I demanded. "Someone who's invested a great deal of money in the Lakeside Premium Beach Club. Someone who
doesn't appreciate obstacles. You've been offered a generous opportunity to leave quietly. I suggest you take it. And if I don't," there was a pause, "then Tuesday morning you'll discover what happens when someone stands in the way of progress. Your cabin isn't the only thing that can be demolished, Mr. Morrison. Reputations, credit scores, employment opportunities, everything's fragile these days." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, anger building. But then I looked at the deed again. 500 FT of Shoreline, the entire beach. Karen wasn't just building on my land, she was stealing it. And based on that threatening phone call, she and her investors thought they'd already won. I spread out the other documents from the tin box. Survey maps, receipts, correspondence between Grandpa and the county. Piece by piece, a picture emerged, and suddenly Dorothy's words made sense. He saw what others couldn't. Monday's HOA meeting was going to be very interesting. Outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. Helga was coming, but she wasn't the only storm about to hit Lakeside Estate. Hurricane Helga had picked up speed overnight. The Weather Service moved up the timeline. Instead of 48 hours, we now had maybe 20, But that wasn't going to stop Karen from her emergency HOA meeting at 8 a.m. sharp. I arrived deliberately late, walking into the packed clubhouse at 8:15 with a thick folder under my arm. The place was standing room only, maybe 200 worried residents crammed into a space meant for half that. Karen was at the front, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation that looked like it belonged at a corporate shareholders meeting. "As you can see," she was saying, her voice carrying that fake concern tone she'd perfected. "The Morrison cabin poses a significant safety risk during the upcoming storm. Its non-compliance with our regulations makes it a liability for the entire community." I settled into a spot at the back, watching Tyler pan his phone camera across the crowd like he was filming a documentary. Karen clicked to the next slide, a glossy rendering of the Lakeside Premium Beach Club. "However, there's good news. Once we've cleared the dangerous structures, construction will begin immediately on our $50 million beach club facility. We've already broken ground, and our investors are committed to having the foundation complete before Helga arrives. This will provide a safe, reinforced structure that will benefit everyone." She clicked again, showing a map that made my blood boil. She'd literally redrawn the property lines, extending the HOA's territory to include all 500 FT of my shoreline. The forgery was brazen, but unless someone knew what to look for, it seemed official enough. "Excuse me," called out Janet Williams, a retiree from 2 houses down. "What about the Morrison cabin? Where's Ryan supposed to go?" Karen's smile tightened. "Mr. Morrison has been offered a very generous relocation package. If he chooses not to accept it, well, the cabin will be completely isolated once construction is complete. No beach access, no lake views. I'm sure he'll make the right decision." She said it like I wasn't even there, but then she made her mistake. "The important thing is that we secure this beach for our community before the storm. Our investors have already provided $10 million in initial funding, and contracts are signed. This is happening, people. By this time tomorrow, Lakeside Estates will have its crown jewel." That was my cue. I stood up slowly and head started turning. "I have a question about beach access," I called out, my voice cutting through the murmurs. Karen's face went rigid. "Mr. Morrison, you're not a member of this association. You have no speaking rights here." "Maybe not," I said, walking down the center.
But I do have property rights, and that's what we need to talk about." Tyler swung his camera toward me, probably thinking he was about to capture my humiliation. I reached the front and turned to face the crowd. "How many of you use the
beach to launch your boats, go swimming, have barbecues by the water?" Hands went up throughout the room. "And how many of you think that beach belongs to the HOA?" Most hands stayed up. I smiled. Wrong. I pulled out the folder and removed the aged deed holding it high. This is the original deed of ownership for 500 FT of shoreline property dated September 15th, 1962. My grandfather bought the entire beach. Not the HOA, not the community, the Marissa family. The room exploded. People jumped to their feet, shouting questions, denials. Karen's fake tan had gone grey. That's impossible. The document is obviously forged." I pulled out the next paper. "County recording, October 1962. Would you like to see the tax records? I've been paying shoreline property taxes for 2 years without even knowing it." I turned to the projector. "May I?" Without waiting for permission, I connected my phone and threw up the real survey map. Here's the actual property line. Every single house in Lakeside Estates needs to cross my land to access the lake. That beach club Karen's building, it's 100% on Morrison property. She's spent $10 million of investor money to build on land she doesn't own. The chaos doubled. Someone screamed, "What about our property values?" Another voice, "If we can't access the lake, our houses are worthless. Karen slammed her hand on the podium. Lies! This is all lies. I have documentation proving. The clubhouse door banged open. Tom Brennan, the police chief, walked in like he owned the place. Sorry to interrupt, but I got a call about a possible fraud situation. Ryan asked me to verify some documents at the county office this morning. He looked straight at Karen. Ma'am, the Morris deed is 100% legitimate. Your construction project, you're building on private property without permission. That's criminal trespass, destruction of property, and given the investor money involved, we're looking at fraud charges.
2.
Karen's legs gave out. She gripped the podium, her perfect composure finally cracking. No, I've invested everything. The room went dead silent. Even Tyler lowered his phone, staring at his mother in shock. 45 years ago, I said quietly. But everyone heard me. My grandfather kept this shoreline for a reason. He could have sold it for a fortune, but he didn't. Today you're going to find out why. The lights flickered. The storm was getting closer. Thunder rumbled overhead like God clearing his throat. Karen's phone started ringing. She looked at the caller ID and went even paler. The investors, she whispered, then louder, hysterical. What am I supposed to tell them? $10 million? Oh God, what have I done? 3 men in expensive suits had entered during the chaos. The one in front, a mountain of a man with scarred knuckles, stepped forward. Miss Fitzgerald, he said, in a voice like gravel. We need to talk now. This was Big Mike Torino, I realized. Construction mogul, rumored mob connections, and apparently Karen's lead investor. There's been a misunderstanding, Karen stammered. The property lines, we can fix this. Big Mike turned to me, cracking his knuckles. You, Morrison, you the problem here? Tom Brennan stepped between us. Gentlemen, let's keep this civil. Mr. Morrison owns the land. That's not a problem. That's a fact. Big Mike's eyes narrowed. Facts can change. People can be convinced one way or another. The threat hung in the air like smoke, but I didn't back down. I'd been pushed around enough. The fact is, I said, meeting his stare, you built on my land without permission. You want to talk? We talked through lawyers. You want to threaten me? We talked through Chief Brennan here. The room held its breath. This was it. The moment everything would either explode or diffuse. Big Mike studied me for a long moment. Then he turned back to Karen. You told us you owned the beach. You showed us deeds, permits, everything. Are you telling me that was all bull? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Finally, Tyler spoke up. Mum's been planning
this for months. She said once Morrison was gone, nothing could stop the beach club. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen turned on her son. Tyler, shut up, but it was too late. Big Mike's face had gone dark. We'll be in touch, Miss Fitzgerald.
About our $10 million tonight. He and his men left and Karen crumpled into a chair. The meeting was over, but the storm, all the storms were just beginning. The aftermath of the meeting was pure chaos. Karen sat in the parking lot, frantically making phone calls to lawyers who kept hanging up on her. The construction crew was packing up their equipment. The foreman shaking his head as he directed the bulldozer back onto the flatbed. 10 years I've been in this business, I heard him tell his crew. Never seen someone try to build on land they didn't own. That woman's either crazy or desperate. Probably both, I thought, watching Tyler approach me hesitantly. For the first time since I'd known him, he wasn't recording. Mr. Morrison, Ryan, can we talk? He looked smaller somehow, like the bravado had been deflated out of him. My mum, she's not okay. She hasn't been okay since Dad left. We stood by my truck as Tyler spilled the truth. The divorce destroyed her. Dad took everything. The house in Adena, the investment accounts, even her jewelry. Said she'd never contributed anything, that she was just a trophy wife. Then he married his 23-year-old assistant and moved to Florida. Tyler kicked at the gravel. Mum got this place in the settlement, but she owes $30 million from loans she co-signed during the marriage. The bank's been calling. This beach club was her Hail Mary. Mortgage everything, get investors, build fast, start making money before he trailed off. Before she loses everything, I finished. Tyler nodded miserably. She's been taking anxiety medication, mixing it with wine. Some nights, she just sits at the kitchen table with all these papers spread out, crying. I know what she's doing is wrong, but she's still my mum, you know. I did know. Family was complicated. But before I could respond, Dorothy appeared carrying another photo album and a manila envelope. Ryan, there's more you need to see about why your grandfather kept the shoreline. We went to my cabin. Tyler trailing behind like a lost puppy. Dorothy spread photos across my kitchen table. Morrison Beach through the decades. 1972, she said, pointing to a picture of flood damage, big storm, roads washed out. Your grandfather opened the beach as an evacuation route, saved 43 people. Another photo, 1985, 4th of July, free community barbecue on the beach. Your grandfather never charged a dime. Page after page of memories, weddings, birthday parties, kids learning to swim, old-timers fishing at dawn. He wrote this in 1990, Dorothy said, pulling out a yellowed letter. To whom it may concern, the shoreline of Lake Minnetonka at Morrison Beach is held in trust for the community. While legally owned by the Morrison family, it should remain accessible to all who respect it. The true value of land isn't in what you can build on it, but in the memories built upon it. George Morrison. I stared at the letter, understanding, finally dawning. Grandpa hadn't kept the beach to get rich. He'd kept it to keep it free. Your mum needs to see this, I told Tyler. She needs to understand what she's trying to destroy. Tyler shook his head. She won't listen. She's too far gone. The investors want their money by tomorrow, or, he didn't finish, but he didn't need to. That's when we heard the commotion outside. Karen was there with 5 HOA board members, but she looked nothing like the put-together president from this morning. Her hair was wild, makeup smeared, designer suit wrinkled. She dropped to her knees on my gravel driveway, not caring about the stones digging in. Ryan, please. Her voice was raw, desperate. I'm begging you. 30 million, that's what.
I'll lose. The house, everything. I'll be on the street. I'll sell you whatever you want. Name your price for the shoreline. 30 million. I'll find a way to get it, I swear. The board members shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the Karen they knew. This was someone stripped of all pretense, all pride. Mum, get up, Tyler pleaded, trying
to lift her, but she shook him off. You don't understand. If I don't deliver this beach club, it's over. They'll take everything. The investors, they're not just businessmen. Big Mike, he's connected to people who don't accept failure, who don't forgive debts. She looked up at me with tears streaming. They'll come after Tyler too. Please, I know I've been horrible, but my son doesn't deserve to pay for my mistake. I felt the weight of the moment. The easy thing would be to let her suffer. She'd certainly tried to make me suffer, but Tyler's face, Dorothy's wisdom, and my grandfather's letter all pointed to something bigger. Get up, Karen, I said quietly. This isn't solving anything. Tom Brennan's cruiser pulled up just then. Storm's getting worse, he announced. Weather service says it'll hit around midnight. We need everyone preparing, not standing around in driveways. He looked at Karen, still on her knees. Ma'am, you might want to go home and board up your windows. But Karen had one more card to play. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. If I can't have the beach, she said, her voice taking on a manic edge. Then no one can, she started, dialing. Hello, Environmental Protection Agency. I need to report toxic waste dumping at Morrison Beach on Lake Minnetonka.
Yes. Illegal chemicals, dead fish, the whole thing. You need to come immediately and close the beach. Mum, no. Tyler lunged for the phone, but she'd already hung up. The smile on her face was triumphant and terrible. They'll red tape your precious.
Beach for years, Ryan. Environmental assessments, cleanup orders, legal battles. Your grandfather's legacy will be a toxic waste site. I felt my blood run cold. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was scorched earth. But Tyler surprised us all. He grabbed his mother's shoulders, shaking her. Mum, stop. This isn't
You. This isn't who you raised me to be. Dad was wrong. You're not nothing. But right now, you're becoming everything he said you were. Karen froze, staring at her son. Then she crumbled, sobbing into his chest. The wind picked up, sending leaves.
swirling. Tom's radio crackled with emergency updates. The storm was coming faster than expected. In a few hours, we'd have bigger problems than property lines and beach clubs. But first, we had to deal with the aftermath of Karen's nuclear option. Tom, I said, we need to head off that EPA complaint. Before, already on it, he said, phone to his ear. I know the regional director. But Ryan, if they do come out here, any construction debris from her project could be considered contamination. We need to document everything before the storm hits. As if on cue, the sky opened up with the first drops of rain. Hurricane Helga was announcing her arrival, and we were running out of time. Hurricane Helga arrived like an uninvited guest who kicks down your door instead of knocking. By 10 p.m., the wind was howling at 70 mph, and rain came sideways in sheets that made visibility impossible. I sat in my grandfather's cabin, built solid in 1960 with old-growth timber and real craftsmanship, listening to the storm test every nail and board. The lights had gone out an hour ago, but I had a generator and plenty of fuel. Through the window, illuminated by lightning flashes, I could see the devastation beginning. The bulldozer that had been meant to demolish my home was now flipped on its side like a toy, sliding slowly toward the lake. The future home of Lakeside Premium Beach Club sign had become a projectile, last seen heading toward Wisconsin. My phone rang. It was Dorothy, and I could hear panic in her voice. Ryan, the big oak fell across Shoreline Drive. It's blocking the only road out. People are trapped in their houses and the water's rising. I looked out toward the lake. She was right. The storm surge was pushing water up onto properties that had never flooded before. The clubhouse, built to modern HOA standards in 2019, had already lost its route. Through the rain, I could see families with flashlights trying to navigate the debris. That's when it hit me. The only safe evacuation route was through my property along the 500 FT of shoreline I owned, the same shoreline Karen had tried to steal. I threw on my rain jacket and headed out into the storm. The wind nearly knocked me over immediately, but I pushed forward using a high-powered flashlight to cut through the darkness. This way, I shouted over the storm, though I doubt anyone could hear me. Follow the shoreline path. One by one, families began to appear out of the chaos. The Johnstons with their 3 kids. The elderly Thompsons moving slowly but steadily. Janet Williams clutching her. I stood at the entrance to my property like a lighthouse, directing people along the beach path that my grandfather had maintained for 60 years. Stay together. Hold hands. Follow the person in front of you. Then I saw them, Karen and Tyler, struggling through the wind. Karen's perfect appearance was gone. She looked like a drowned rat in designer clothing. She slipped on the wet sand and went down hard. Without thinking, I ran to them, grabbing Karen's arm and pulling her up. Come on, get to the cabin. She looked at me with eyes that held no more fight, no more schemes, just fear, and exhaustion. Tyler supported her other side, and together we got her moving. Inside the cabin, it was standing room only. 60 people crammed into a space meant for 10, but nobody complained. We were safe, dry, and the walls that had stood for 60 years continued to hold. Children cried, adults comforted each other, and somewhere in the corner Karen sat silently, staring at nothing. "Kind of ironic," said Bob Martinez, shaking water from his jacket. "The beach Karen wanted to steal just saved our lives." Others murmured agreement. The very shoreline that had been at the center of all this conflict had become our salvation. Through my grandfather's foresight and the strange turns of fate, Morrison Beach had once again become a lifeline for the community. Tyler approached me, voice low. "Thank you. After everything, you didn't have to help us." "Your mum was right about one thing," I said, watching the storm rage outside. "This is about community, just not the way she thought." Dorothy, always prepared, had brought a battery-powered radio. Through the static, we heard the news. Hurricane Helga has strengthened to Category 3. Storm surge of 8 to 10 FT expected along Lake Minnetonka. Residents are advised to seek higher ground immediately. Repeat, this is a life-threatening situation. But we were already on higher ground. My grandfather had built on the perfect spot, elevated just enough to avoid flooding while maintaining lake access. Another piece of his foresight revealing itself. An old-timer named George, ironically sharing my grandfather's name, spoke up from his corner. "This reminds me of '72, big storm, roads washed out. Your granddad opened up this same beach path, saved half the neighborhood. History repeating itself." Aaron heard this and finally broke her silence. "I tried to destroy all of this," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "For money, for pride, for revenge against a world that took everything from me." She looked around the packed cabin. "And you saved me anyway." The cabin shook as something large hit the exterior wall, probably debris from the demolished clubhouse, but the walls held. My grandfather had built this place to last, to shelter, to protect, just like he'd preserved the beach. "We're not done yet," Tom Brennan announced, his police radio crackling. "Weather Service says the eye will pass over us in about an hour. We'll have a brief calm, then it'll hit again from the other direction." But there was something else in his voice, something worried. He motioned me over. "Ryan, we've got another problem. The dam upstream at Miller Creek, it's showing signs
of stress.
If it goes, Morrison Beach would be under 10 FT of water." Dorothy finished. Her teacher's mind always quick with calculations. The cabin went quiet except for the storm. Everyone understood what that meant. We'd survived Karen's schemes and Helga's first assault, but if that dam broke, none of it would matter. Karen laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. "See, even God doesn't want you to have it. The beach, the legacy, everything. It'll all be underwater. At least I won't be the only one."
"Who loses everything?" "Mom, stop," Tyler said firmly. But I was thinking.
The dam, the storm, the beach. There had to be a connection, a solution. My grandfather had planned for so much. Surely he'd considered this too. I went to the old desk in the corner, pulling out the surveyor's maps I'd brought in earlier. There, in faded pencil, I saw it. Notation about water flow, drainage, natural barriers. The shoreline wasn't just a beach. It was designed as a natural break against flooding, if we could reinforce certain points. "I need volunteers," I announced. "When the eye pass is over, we have maybe 20 minutes of calm. We can use the construction equipment, what's left of it, to build barriers at key points along the shoreline. It might be enough to redirect the water if the dam fails. It was dangerous, maybe impossible, But looking around that cabin full of neighbors, I knew we had to try. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about survival, and maybe, just maybe, redemption. The eye of Hurricane Helga passed over us at exactly 2:17 a.m., bringing an eerie calm that felt like the world holding its breath. We had 18 minutes. That's what Tom's weather radio estimated before the back wall of a storm hit. Volunteers mobilized quickly. Bob Martinez and his sons, Tyler, who surprised everyone by being the first to step up, and even Janet Williams, 73, years old and tough as nails. We rushed out onto Morrison Beach with flashlights, shovels, and desperate determination. The bulldozer Karen had brought to destroy my cabin became our salvation. Tyler, it turned out, actually knew how to operate.
It
Spent a summer working construction, he explained, firing up the engine before Mom decided I should be an influencer. We worked like our lives depended on it because they did. Using the surveyor's map, we built BMS at the 3 critical points. My grandfather had marked, piling sand and debris into barriers that might redirect floodwater away from the properties. Karen watched from the cabin doorway, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, looking like she'd aged 10 years in one night. As we worked, something remarkable happened. The artificial boundaries that had divided us, members versus non-members, rich versus working class, old-timers versus newcomers, disappeared.
We were just neighbors trying to save each other. 5 minutes, Tom shouted. We made our final adjustments and ran for the cabin. I was the last one in, taking one final look at our makeshift barriers. They looked pitifully small against the vast
darkness of the lake, but they were something. The storm's return was even more violent than its arrival. The cabin groaned and creaked, windows rattling in their frames. Then we heard it. A sound like a freight train that wasn't the wind. "The dam," someone whispered. We waited, helpless as the sound of rushing water grew louder. Through the rain-lashed windows we could see it coming, a wall of water surging down from Miller Creek. It hit our barriers, and for a moment, I thought, they'd wash away like sandcastles, but they held. The water split, diverted, flowing around the properties instead of through them. Not perfectly, there would still be flooding, but the barriers broke the water's force, turned a catastrophe into merely a disaster. Dawn came slowly, revealing a transformed landscape. The storm had passed, leaving destruction in its wake. The HOA clubhouse was simply gone, reduced to a concrete slab and scattered debris. Several newer homes had major damage, but the cabin stood strong, and more importantly, no lives were lost. As people began to venture outside, they naturally gathered on Morrison Beach, or what was left of it. The storm had rearranged the shoreline, but it was still there, still accessible, still ours. I stood looking out at the lake, now calm and
innocent-looking when I realized everyone was watching me. 200 people wet and exhausted and displaced, waiting to hear what would happen next.
I still held the deed to 500 FT of Shoreline. After last night, nobody questioned its validity. I could fence it off, charge for access, finally monetize what my grandfather had preserved. After what Karen had put me through, no one would blame me. This shoreline, I began, my voice carrying across the gathered crowd, legally belongs to me. The deed is clear. The taxes are paid. The boundaries are established. I saw shoulders slump, faces fall. They thought I was about to lock them out, and according to the law, I have every right to restrict access, to ban all of you from ever setting foot on this beach again. The silence was heavy as wet sand. But my grandfather didn't preserve this beach for the law. He preserved it for you, for us, for the community that existed before HOAs and beach, clubs and $50 million developments. I held up the deed. Morrison Beach will remain what it's always been, a place for families, for memories, for neighbors helping neighbors. No fees, no memberships, no restrictions except respect for the land and each other. The crowd erupted in cheers, people crying and hugging, but I wasn't done. There's one condition. The HOA as it exists now has to go. We need a community board that actually serves the community, not developer interests, democratic, transparent, and focused on what matters, taking care of each other. The vote was unanimous, conducted right there on the storm-altered beach. Karen stood to formally resign, her voice steady despite everything. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I let greed and fear turn me into someone I don't recognize, but
I want you all to know I'm sorry, truly sorry. Then the investors arrived, 3 black SUVs pulling up to survey their ruined investment. Big Mike Torino stepped out, his expensive suit incongruous among the storm debris.
he walked straight to me, ignoring everyone else. Morrison, hell of a storm. But business is business. The beach situation. Let's talk realistic numbers. My employer is prepared to offer $15 million for the Shoreline rights cash today. He handed me a business card and my blood chilled. Wellington International Development. We buy everything. Karen gasped. That's Richard's company, my ex-husband. Big Mike smiled coldly. Mr. Wellington has been watching this situation with interest. He thinks this community is undervalued, starting with your beach. He plans to buy up damaged properties cheap, rebuild luxury, price out the locals. It's just business. So that was the game. Karen had been a pawn in her ex-husband's scheme all along. Use her desperation to secure the beach, then swoop in to buy up the rest. Tell Wellington his offer is
Rejected, I said firmly. This beach isn't for sale. Not for 15 million, not for 50 million.
Big Mike's expression darkened. You're making a mistake, Morrison. Wellington doesn't like being told no. Tom Brennan stepped forward, hand resting on his service weapon. And I don't like implied threats in my jurisdiction. Time for you, gentlemen, to leave. As the SUVs pulled away, I realized this wasn't over. Richard Wellington had money, connections, and a grudge. But looking around at my neighbors, tired, wet, but united, I knew we'd face whatever came next together. Dorothy smiled at me, that knowing teacher smile. Your grandfather would be proud, Ryan. You didn't just save the beach, you saved the community. Tyler approached, hesitant but determined. Mr. Morrison, Ryan, I want to help rebuild. Really help. Not just for social media. I know I've been a jerk, but last night showed me what actually matters. His mother stood behind him, tears in her eyes. For all her faults, she'd raised a son who could choose to be better. And maybe that meant there was hope for her too. The sun broke through the remaining clouds, warming our faces. Morrison Beach was battered but not broken, just like us. The real work of rebuilding structures and trust alike would begin today. But for this moment, we stood together on the shoreline my grandfather had preserved, united by survival and something more. This beach had saved us in more ways than one. Now it was our turn to save it. 1 year later, Morrison Beach looked better than ever. The storm had actually improved it in some ways, creating a natural cove that made swimming safer for kids and depositing fresh sand that sparkled in the morning sun. Where Karen's failed beach club construction had torn up the ground, we'd built something different. Picnic tables made from reclaimed storm debris, fire pits for evening gatherings, and a playground where children's laughter replaced the roar of bulldozers. A hand-carved wooden sign stood at the entrance. Morrison Beach, community shared since 1960, and below, in smaller letters, dedicated to those who choose community over profit. I was fixing one of the picnic tables when Tyler's food truck rolled up, music playing and the smell of burgers filling the air. Tyler's Redemption Burgers had become the unofficial heart of the beach, and Tyler himself had transformed from an aspiring influencer into someone the community actually respected. He'd started by giving away free meals to families affected by the storm and somehow never stopped finding ways to help. "Morning, Ryan," he called out, already prepping for the lunch rush. "Mum's coming by later. She wants to talk to you about something." Karen? She'd lost the house, the Range Rover, everything material, but she'd gained something else. After paying back what she could to the investors and declaring bankruptcy, she'd moved into a small apartment downtown and taken a job as a bookkeeper at a local non-profit. Every weekend, she volunteered at the food bank. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and t-shirts, but she smiled more now. Real smiles, not the plastic HOA president version. Dorothy Walsh ran the new community board with the wisdom of a career educator and the efficiency of someone who didn't tolerate nonsense. Our first vote had been unanimous. Morrison Beach would remain open to all forever. The second vote established the annual Morrison Legacy Festival, celebrating not just my grandfather, but all the families who'd built this community. Around noon, Karen appeared at the beach for the first time since the storm. She looked nervous, standing at the entrance, like she needed permission to enter. "It's okay," I called out. "The beach is for everyone, remember?" She walked over slowly, taking in the changes. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "What your grandfather envisioned, but even better." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, then she spoke again. "I got a letter from Richard, my ex. He's not giving up on developing this area. I'd been expecting this. Wellington International had been quietly buying damaged properties, offering cash to desperate families, but they'd hit a wall. Without beach access, their investments were worth far less. "Let him try," I said. "He can't force us to sell what isn't for sale." Aaron smiled, and for the first time I saw the person she might have been without the weight of debt and desperation. That's what I told him. Actually, I used stronger words. Felt good. Tyler jogged over with a small girl in tow. "Mom, this is Emma. She wants to know if the beach belongs to everyone." Karen knelt down to the child's level. "It does, sweetheart. This beach belongs to all of us." The little girl looked at me. "Even you?" I laughed. "Especially me. I just take care of it for everyone." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer and ran off to join her friends at the playground. As the afternoon wore on, the beach filled with families. The Johnstons were teaching their kids to fish where my grandfather had taught me. Janet Williams led a watercolor class for seniors, painting the view that Karen had tried to monetize. Bob Martinez and his sons were setting up for an evening barbecue free for anyone who wanted to join. This was what 500 FT of Shoreline could be when it wasn't locked behind membership fees and exclusivity. Tom Brennan stopped by on patrol, now more friend than police chief. "Wellington's lawyers have been sniffing around the courthouse again," he mentioned casually, "looking for loopholes, ways to force a sale. They won't find any. Your grandfather's paperwork was airtight." As the sun began to set, I climbed up on one of the picnic tables. Without planning it, a speech came. A year ago, a storm tested us. Not just wind and rain, but a storm of greed, fear, and division. We could have let it destroy us. Instead, we chose each other. Morrison Beach isn't special because of the sand or the water or the view. It's special because of this. Neighbors helping neighbors. Strangers becoming friends. A community that refuses to be bought or sold. The crowd had grown to nearly 100 people, all nodding, some wiping away tears. Karen stood at the back, Tyler's arm around her shoulders. My grandfather used to say that you can't own nature, you can only be its caretaker. He kept this beach not to get rich, but to stay rich in the ways that matter. Friendship, community,
Memories. Today, Morrison Beach is legally in my name, but it belongs to all of you in every way that counts, and that's how it'll stay, forever. The applause was warm and genuine.
As it died down, Emma, the little girl from earlier, tugged on my shirt. "Mr. Bryan, my mum says you saved the beach from a mean lady who wanted to take it away. Is that true?" I looked at Karen, who was watching with a sad smile. "No, sweetheart. The beach saved us, all of us, even the lady who thought she wanted to take it away. Later, as twilight painted the lake purple and gold, I sat on the same spot where I'd had my morning coffee that day. Karen first showed up with her evacuation notice. So much had changed, yet the important things remained. The lake still lapped at the shore with its eternal rhythm. Families still gathered to watch the sunset, and Morrison Beach remained what my grandfather had always intended. Not a commodity to be developed, but a gift to be shared. In the distance, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. There would always be storms, whether natural or man-made. Richard, Wellington would keep trying. Other developers would see opportunity where we saw home. But we'd weathered Hurricane Helga and Hurricane Karen. We'd survive whatever came next, because that's what communities do. They endure, they adapt, they protect what matters, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, they teach a stubborn engineer with a tin box full of old papers that the greatest inheritance isn't property or money, but the wisdom to know when to hold on and when to let go. Morrison Beach would stay free, the community would stay strong, and somewhere I was certain my grandfather was smiling. "You made it through. Hit that next video and let's keep the madness."